On Business Incorporated today. African Union Commission receives $11.48 million grant for governance and institutional support. Booster shots now a requirement for visitors to Botswana. And Nigeria's federal government to raise 150 billion naira through bond auction, and it starts on Wednesday, the 16th of February. Hello, welcome to the first episode of Business Incorporated on Channels Television for this week. I'm Ini John Mekwa. We begin as usual with the market numbers from Africa, where trading sentiments were the color reflecting today, Valentine, but Nigeria's main index managed to hold its head above water at 0.04%, while South Africa's index dropped over 1% at intraday. Egypt's equities market is also in the red, it's down almost 1%. Also, Nairobi Stock Exchange ended Thursday trading session in the red. What a red day. And now to the Middle East, where it's a different story. It was mostly green. Abu Dhabi index was up 0.81%, almost 1% at intraday, while Dubai's index was the lone loser, trading down 0.48%. Elsewhere in the region, Saudi Arabia is positive, up over 1%. Qatar index also looking very good, almost 0.5%. Now let's go to Europe. Ukraine and Russia tensions are top on the mind in Europe, where in Germany, as Chancellor Olaf Scholz heads to Kiev and Moscow. Scholz is expected to try to convince Russian leader Vladimir Putin to de-escalate the standoff between the two countries. Well, we have joining us now to give us the details of that and, of course, how markets are reacting to that. We have Janelle Dumalon joining us now from Berlin. Hello, Jamel. So what is expected from this visit from Scholz going to Kiev and Moscow?
Indeed, now it has to be pointed out that Scholz is making this trip amid what is an especially tense week in this ongoing story. There have been reports quoting intelligence sources by Associated Press, for example, that Russia is targeting Wednesday this week as a potential invasion date, although U.S. officials have not confirmed this. Now, last night, on the eve of his trip to Kyiv and Moscow, Olaf Scholz sought to emphasize that Western allies would immediately impose sanctions on Russia if it invaded Ukraine again. He did not go into great detail as to what that would look like, but the U.S. and the EU have warned they may potentially target Russian banks for sanctions. The controversial Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, meant to deliver Russian gas to Europe via the Baltic Sea, may be junked as well. In any case, Scholz is not expected to make any breakthroughs, but his trip is meant to be taken as a step towards better understanding Russian goals in order to help find a diplomatic solution to the crisis.
Yeah, well, that sounds like Wednesday is the day that the whole world will be looking at the actions of Russia. But airlines have been escalating back flights from Ukraine, with some like KLM suspending flights altogether. How is Ukraine reacting to this?
Now, for its part, Kyiv has said that airlines are free to decide what to do, but it will keep its airspace open. Ukraine's State Air Traffic Service did, however, advise airlines to avoid flying over the open waters of the Black Sea for now because of Russian naval exercises. The government is also allocating almost $600 million to guarantee flights to and from the country, as airlines like Lufthansa consider scrapping flights, while others like KLM have done so already. This weekend, SkyUp, that is a Ukrainian charter and low-cost carrier, had to land what was meant to be a flight from Madeira to Kyiv in Moldova after its Irish owner refused to allow the plane to fly to Ukraine. That's all coming as reports emerge that insurers are withdrawing cover for aircraft traveling through Ukrainian airspace. But these developments are just a further sign of how increasingly fraught the mood here in Europe is over these tensions at the Russian-Ukrainian border.
Yeah, so paint to us the picture in the market with all of these possibilities and forecasts. How's the market reacting to it?
Although they're still reeling from global inflation-related concerns and how central banks are dealing with them, investors are now paying closer attention to the events on the Russian-Ukrainian border. As I said earlier, we could be looking at a really decisive week for this saga. You might have already noticed that oil prices have risen to yet another 7-year high. Russia is, of course, a major energy exporter, providing a third of Europe's natural gas and 10% of global oil production. Some experts are even warning of the potential for a food shock, as Ukraine is a major exporter of grain. As a reaction to all of this, European markets are broadly registering falls at the beginning of this trading week, with Germany's DAX, Britain's FTSE, and France's CAC 40 all reflecting a dominant risk-off sentiment that may prove persistent.
All right, thank you so much, Janelle Dumalon from Berlin for that update. We move over to the UK now, but it seems, well, the headlines is still the same. The issue between Russia and Ukraine is having diverse effects on market and the economy. And now UK energy and gas sector may be reacting to that too, or is feeling the pinch. Well, we have Juliana joining us now for the details. Hello, Juliana. Good afternoon. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to you, Innie.
Yeah. So the UK wholesale gas contract for next day delivery has risen by 8% to 197p per therm. Even before this disruption from Russia, which, I mean, Janelle just hinted us may be on Wednesday. Is this all about the fear, or are there other factors driving it?
Absolutely, it's fear. I think supply chain disruptions is what's dominating market sentiment, not just in Europe, but here in the UK. And this is despite the fact that we only import about 3% of our gas from Russia. The vast majority is from the North Sea, which is why we've been hearing from the Energy Minister, Greg Hands, saying that for energy security, the British gas pumpers need to be pumping as much as possible so we don't get caught up in the crisis, which we have done already. And even though Russia does only export just a small chunk of its gas to the UK, our pipelines are directly connected to Europe. So there are fears there, as you were just discussing. We know that potentially a conflict is imminent, though, of course, you've got to be careful and listen to all sides of the story, because even though the US have said that Wednesday is potentially the day that Russia will invade Ukraine, we know that the Ukrainian leaders are asking the US for evidence of this information, which they haven't seemed to have provided as yet. But all camps are squarely focused on what is going to happen to that. And we have heard from the US, we have heard from the UK. In fact, just a few minutes ago, we heard from the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and they have been pretty clear that if there is an invasion, which does seem incredibly likely, then there will be severe sanctions on Russia. Russia, of course, have already been suffering from sanctions over the past couple of years. They said they will hit much harder. And of course, Russia will retaliate. And that's where the fear of the markets are coming from. If they do retaliate, how will they retaliate? Are they going to stop oil flows? Are they going to stop gas flows? That is the fear, and that's what's being reflected in the market today, Innie.
Yeah, so I tell you, Wednesday is just a couple of days, a couple of hours away. So everybody will be looking out at what will happen. But in Europe, we heard there that the markets have already started reacting to the possible invasion. What about the markets in the UK? We see that the FTSE was down this morning, and travel stocks led the downers. What's happening in the markets at this time?
Well, yes, red. Red is the colour of the FTSE today, and I don't think it's got anything to do with Valentine's. However, there was one headline I read saying today is the European Valentine's Day massacre of the markets. Not sure how people will take that, but it's certainly true. The FTSE started off in the red. It's very much in the red. Triple-digit sell-offs on the FTSE. The all-share is down at intraday by 1.99%. The FTSE 100 is down by 1.85%, and the FTSE 250, the domestic market, that's down by a whopping 2.23%. 0.3%. In the currencies market, the British pound also down on the US dollar by 0.38%, down on the euro by 0.10%, and down on the Japanese yen by 0.75%. Got to say, there are certainly some investors who sadly profit from war, but I think it's the uncertainty of what is going to happen that's got investors on edge in London.
Yeah. So apart from Wednesday that we're counting down to for the possibility, what else should we look out for the week?
Busy week this week, Innie. We're going to be busy this week. Lots of corporate news starting off tomorrow with unemployment data. We know unemployment has been steadily declining in the UK. I believe the last rate was about 4.1% for the month of December. A very, very good time to get a job in the UK. Lots of vacancies, over 1 million vacancies. However, lots of employers are struggling to find people with the right skill set. That's a huge issue. So will be interesting to see what that goes down to tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, very, very important, apart from what may or may not happen on the border of Ukraine, we've got inflation figures. Now, inflation in December was at 5.4%, the highest it's been in this country since about 1992. We're going to be having a look at January's data. So unfortunately, we're still looking in the rearview mirror, whereas the Bank of England, who have a much more forensic look, they are seeing inflation day to day. They think it's running at about 7.5%. And this is not just a number. This is badly affecting consumers here in the UK. There's nobody in the UK at the moment who can go into a store and not see that prices are rising fast. Unfortunately, wages are not rising as fast as the numbers. And then on Thursday, we've got retail sales figures, expecting a negative. Again, December cut short by Omicron, even though we know now that it's not as deadly. We didn't know then, so lots of people were staying away from the shops. And then on Friday, I think there's one more, yes, flash PMI data for manufacturing, construction and services. So we're going to have a look at the private sector. We know that GDP fell by 0.4% in December. Has it picked up? We'll just have to wait and see.
Very, very busy week, Juliana. Very busy one. Well, thank you so much.
It will be busy. And there's a prospect of war.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate one. But we're here. We're here to report all the stories, all sides of it. Thank you so much, Juliana. Enjoy your Valentine.
You too, Innie.
So let's move to Asia now. Shares in Japan led losses in Asia Pacific today as investors monitor developments from the COVID situation in Hong Kong to tensions between Russia and Ukraine affecting everywhere. The Nikkei 225 dropped 2.223% to close at 27,079.59, with shares of conglomerate SoftBank Group falling nearly 4%, while the Topix index shed 1.63% to almost 2,000. South Korea's Kospi declined 1.57% to end its trading day at 2,704.48. Hong Kong's Hang Seng index dipped 1.35% as of its final hour of trading as the city faces a fifth wave of COVID infections. Stocks in mainland China closed in the negative territory, with the Shanghai Composite falling almost 1% to 3,428.88, while the Shenzhen Component slipped 0.76% to over 13,000. Elsewhere, the S&P AX 200 in Australia climbed 0.37%, closing at over 7,000, while MCS Broadex Index of Asia Pacific shares outside Japan declined 1.4%. In the United States now, stock futures were in the negative as intraday as investors continue to monitor the developing tension between Ukraine and Russia and potential Fed rate hikes. Futures tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average shed more than 0.5%, while S&P 500 futures and Nasdaq 100 futures lost close to 1% each. The moves follow a rocky week for stocks, which were pressured by a hot inflation report and fears of Russian attack on Ukraine. The Dow and S&P 500 fell 1% and 1.8% respectively for the week. The tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite slid more than 2%. Traders are also weighing the potential impact of surging inflation on the U.S. economy, as well as the potential measures the Federal Reserve could take to quell the jump in prices. We'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll head straight to the African continent. Should the rich be taxed more in Africa? Find out. Follow up that conversation on Business Incorporated right after the break. You're welcome back to Business Incorporated on Channels Television, where surveys from Kenya, Ethiopia, and Uganda show that over 71% of citizens think that it is fair to tax the rich more to fund programs that benefit people living in poverty. If East African government increase their tax revenues by just 1% of their GDP, they would raise an additional $4.9 billion each year for the next 5 years. Is this a possibility? Could it be implemented? And what would this mean, especially to the funding of healthcare and health infrastructure? We have Matt Kindiger speaking to this possibility here now. Matt is joining us from the UK. Hi, Matt. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me on the program today.
I guess I should ask first, are you part of the rich even though you're not in Africa?
Oh, I don't know. It really depends on your own context, I suppose.
The definition of the rich.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so how likely are tax hikes how likely are we to see it over the coming years?
So increasingly likely, including on higher income individuals and households in Africa. What we have seen over the last year, over the last 2 years, is that governments in Africa have benefited from high commodity prices globally. We have seen South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya all benefit from these high global commodity prices, which have supported fiscal revenues. And as a result, they have delayed increases to taxes. But in our view, here at Frontier View, you don't see high commodity prices lasting long enough or remaining high enough for a long period of time to compensate for the fact that government finances really are in quite a bad state across Africa. So what we do expect to see is governments aiming to broaden their tax revenue bases over the coming months, over the coming year or so. What this will probably look like is instead of very aggressive tax hikes immediately, is first the tightening of tax collection measures. So businesses, higher income households will probably see governments coming after them a bit more aggressively, being a lot stricter with the tax collection. After that, we'll probably see things like import taxes, import duties, and corporation and higher income consumer, corporation taxes and taxes on higher income consumers rising after that. So a bit of a delay to tax increases, but they are probably inevitable and they probably will increase over a period of time.
Well, I can tell you in Nigeria that the government has become even more aggressive when it comes to tax collection. But what does this tell us about the state of public finances across the continent?
So certainly what it does say is that public finances are not great, and in many cases we have seen deteriorating public finances across the continent. So public finances were not great also before COVID-19. It's always worth remembering this, that things were starting to look a bit tight for many African governments, but COVID-19 really blew apart fiscal projections that governments had. Remember that we had the world's first COVID-related default in Zambia last year. Angola flirted with default as well, narrowly missed default in 2021. And a couple of weeks ago, we saw Ghana's credit rating downgrade, which sort of sent a signal that things were not as good as we thought they were from a fiscal position there. Although most governments were able to avoid a crisis in 2021, partly thanks to IMF support, but also because of high commodity prices, we now see fiscal pressures really coming to a head in 2022, and this is the year when government will be faced to address these fiscal pressures for both 2022, but also to ensure that they retain longer-term credibility with investors. So short-term issues around COVID have worsened things, but we certainly expect public finances to remain under pressure over the next year or so.
And looking at your crystal ball now, which of the countries do you expect to be like the first to raise taxes this year?
Yeah, certainly it's a good question because it's not going to be even across the board. We don't expect every market to raise taxes at the same time and on the same, will raise the same taxes at the same time. We are closely monitoring government budgets over the course of the next few months. South Africa has its budget speech next month. The government was actually able to delay the raising of taxes from late 2021, but we now expect the budget speech, probably October, November this year, to see the first tax increases. So South Africa will probably be one of the later countries to raise taxes. But countries like Kenya and Ghana are expected to raise taxes slightly earlier, and this is because the fiscal pressures in these markets are much more acute. So we could see tax increases, even before Kenya's election, but they probably would be very targeted on higher income households and also companies, and they probably wouldn't affect lower income consumers. Nigeria, a very interesting case, although, as you've mentioned, the government is becoming increasingly strict with tax collection. It has received or benefited from a bit of breathing space as a result of higher oil prices globally. So this has provided a bit of extra funding or fiscal receipts for the government, but it is inevitable that tax collection measures will tighten probably from the second half of the year. Overall, most other African governments are likely to raise taxes as well. So those are a few highlights, but the general trend is pretty much across the board tax increases in 2022.
All right, Matt, thank you. I just knew Nigeria would have to be in that list. So thank you so much, Matt Kindiga, practice leader at Sub-Saharan Africa Front of View. Thank you so much for your thoughts with us.
Thanks very much.
Moving on now, the African Union Commission will benefit from an $11.48 million grant from the African Development Fund to strengthen its governance and provide it with institutional support. The grants will contribute to the institutional capacity building for the African Union Project, a program designed to improve the AUC's capacity to drive Agenda 2063. Agenda 2063 is the African Union's vision for an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena. We move over now to Botswana, where from today, the 14th of February 2022, visitors who have not taken their booster shots of COVID-19 vaccine will be barred from entering the country. The Health Ministry defines being fully vaccinated as having taken 2 doses of a 2-dose vaccine regime or a single dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. If one has taken any of the 2 and is overdue for booster shots, they are no longer regarded as fully vaccinated until they have taken the booster shot. For unvaccinated persons, Botswana will now require a 72-hour negative PCR COVID-19 test, and that person needs to undertake a vaccination at the port of entry at own cost and also go for quarantine at own cost. In South Africa, the Labour Department of the country has asked the courts to fine the local unit of China's Huawei Technologies for breaking rules on hiring local workers and to order the company to amend its practices. About 90% of the company's employees were foreign nationals, violating employment equity regulations, which impose a limit of 40%. The department said that it has filed court papers seeking for a fine of 1.5 million rand, or 2% of the local firm's 2020 turnover for the alleged rule breaches. The court is being asked to grant an order to implement an employment equity plan that will address the status quo. In response, Huawei South Africa says it is committed to continue engaging further with the department on equity plan. And here in Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Authority of the Debt Management Office, on behalf of the federal government, is seeking to raise 150 million naira worth of bonds in its latest offer for subscription by auction. The debt office described the offer as 75 billion naira FGN January 2026 as a 10-year reopening with 12.50% rate, and 75 billion, that's 13 FGN, or that's for the January 2042 maturity security. And then the offer is in 1,000 per unit, subject to a minimum subscription of 50 billion and in multiples of 1,000 thereafter, with auction date of February 16th, 2022 and settlement date of February 18th, 2022. Let's go to Ghana now, where the president, Nana Addo Akufo-Addo, has said that the country is implementing a national plan of action to curb the menace of illegal and unregulated fishing. According to Mr. Akufo-Addo, the plan includes fish catch certification, the reactivation and installation of vessel monitoring systems, automatic identification system on vessels, ports and beach inspections, and sea patrols. Ghana and its neighbors, Togo and Benin, have signed a pact to implement a joint fisheries observer program as part of efforts to ensure that safe, secure, and legal fisheries were maintained across the Gulf of Guinea. And the African Development Bank FASHIONOMICS Africa Initiative's second online competition is offering $6,000 in cash, mentoring, new branding packages, and other support for winning African designers of sustainable and circular fashion. The FASHIONOMICS Africa, in collaboration with the United Nations Environment Programme, Parsons School of Design, Strategic Consulting and Communications Agency, BPCM, and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation invites interested African brands to apply to the Sustainable Fashion online competition. Entrants must be pursuing environmentally friendly measures, sustainability, and circular economy actions to qualify. That's it for the first episode of Business Incorporated on Channel Television for this week. We have 4 more to go. To join us for those ones. See you tomorrow. I'm John Mekwa.